SOB 501, research methods. Research methods. Now, you remember that during the orientation, I mentioned that research will be a very important component of the program. One of the criticisms that often come against MBA is the fact that it is not research intensive. So we want to depart a bit from that notion so that we can equip you very well so that when they are discussing research, you can also make what? Very valuable inputs. Such that if you want to do further feel free to make contributions, ask questions, ask for clarifications when necessary. So they have the same high-level degrees that lecturers have, which means that they can conduct high-level research. If you have MBA, we expect some high level of analytical skills and analytical abilities, some of which you can hone through your study of research methods. So the course will basically introduce you to research techniques. As a manager, you must have research techniques at your fingertips so that you can do research for your workplace, you can do research as consultancy, and you can also do research to fulfill academic requirements. One of the requirements of this program is for you to do some research. We call it term paper. So this course is important. So what are the objectives of this program? The main objective is to expose you to the elements of the research process. How do you start a research process? How do you develop the research topic? How do you define research problem? How do you decide on how many people you have to interview? Where do you get your data from? How do you collect the data such that the data will be valid for the purposes of analysis? After collecting the data, you have to analyze. How do you analyze the data? And what will be the basis for your analysis? What are your beliefs as a researcher? Your beliefs will inform the research methods that you choose, and we'll come to all those things. So that by the end of it, you have a broader appreciation of the research context, and then you should be able to apply what we learn here to real life situations. What are the learning outcomes? By the end of the course, you should be able to, one, demonstrate an understanding of the research process and how it is relevant in your academic journey. And one of the lectures will cover the research process. Then ethical issues about research should be familiar with you. And I earlier on talked about issues of plagiarism, issues of invading the privacies of the respondents, not taking their consent before conducting the research. All of that, we'll look at it. Issues of using artificial intelligence for research, all those issues, we'll deal with them along the line. Then you must have an appreciation of research concepts and techniques. Because one of the things we do during Vivas, in your case, we will not do Viva. You have a student presenting results, and then the student will get to methodology and say that, okay, I use purposive sampling. I use purposive sampling. Then we ask the student, okay, first of all, what is purposive sampling? And that's where you see problem. He or she has used purposive sampling, but cannot define purposive sampling. It may be true that you have used it, but the conclusion the panel will come to is that it is somebody who did it for you. Because in their view, how can you use something you don't know? Okay, so we have to be able to understand concepts, and we'll deal with a lot of concepts. Then philosophical assumptions. Researchers come to a particular research agenda wearing different lenses. When I pick a research paper to read, the lens from which I look at the paper would be different from the lens from which you look at the paper. We call that philosophical assumptions. I may believe that if you have not used quantitative methods, then the research is not valid. That's my view, and that's my training. Somebody would believe that no, you don't need to use those mathematical equations. What is important is to document the views of the respondents. Go with a tape recorder. As they speak, you record it, and then you transcribe it, and then analyze what they said. They may not mention figures 1, 2, 3, but that is what will bring out the real situation on the ground. So that is what that person will view as valid research. So there's always a debate between those who believe that everything has to be reduced to mathematical equations, and those who believe that those mathematical equations are irrelevant. They are just meant to deceive people and to confuse people. Either way we allow. It depends on how you argue as your case. But as we go on, I will declare my stance. Because as a researcher, I have my lens. I'll let you know my lens. You will decide your lens, the lens that I'll present you all the lenses. You will decide your lens, but you have to also, you should be able to convince us why your lens is valid. That's what research is about. The fact that you are using just a recorder and transcribing does not mean that it doesn't involve the scientific process. So long as you follow the scientific process, the outcome of the research will be valid. So we'll go through what you must do for each of the perspectives to ensure that the research that you come out with is valid and acceptable. And that has informed academic journals and their perspectives. There are some academic journals, if you submit a paper and there are no equations, they will not accept it, they will reject it. There are other academic journals, if you submit and there are equations, they will reject it. What I'm saying is that no matter which philosophy you decide to embrace, there's room for you. Just that you have to follow the scientific requirements of the philosophy that you will choose. And you should be able to review literature by the end of the day. Then one of your projects will be to review literature, define a problem, and review literature so that we will see how you are following. Then distinguish among, we have quantitative research, qualitative research, and mixed methods. Qualitative research, quantitative, then when you put them together, you have what? Mixed method. We'll go through all of that. Then you should be able to present your research. After you have done the research, it is now time to disseminate the information. We disseminate the information through various networks. The first is to get it published in a recognized journal as an academic. Second is that I can write a book and cause the book to be edited. Then it becomes a valid book. So as an academic, I just cannot write a book and then I go to the printing press and then they will just print for me and I start selling. No, it is not regarded as valid knowledge. Somebody else who is my peer or superior must go through it in the same discipline and say that, okay, I think this book is of good standards that can go out and can constitute valid knowledge for students to use it for learning, for lecturers to use it for teaching, for government to use it to make policy, for industry to use it to apply in their circumstances. So that's what we constitute. Otherwise, self-publishing is not regarded as quality academic work. Now, when that is done, we'll go through course delivery. We'll basically have lectures, we have discussions, we have case analysis and group discussions. I've already talked to you about plagiarism. The UDS has a plagiarism policy now, and I've provided the link. If you go to a website, you can download it and then learn more about it. I've told you about zero tolerance for artificial intelligence generated text. The grading system, as mentioned earlier, 60% final exam, 40% continuous assessment. Now, in terms of recommended texts, there are so many business research method books. But the main text, so I've labeled main text. That's Hare, Page, and Bransville. Essentials of Business Research Methods, published by Routledge, the 4th edition. There are copies that are available online for free download, so you can search for it and download. That will be the main text. Then we have supplementary text. And among the supplementary text, the one listed first, that's the number 2, Saunders, Lewis, and Thornhill, will be the leading supplementary text. In other words, some of the lectures, like today's lecture, most of it is coming from Saunders. So in the course outline, I've listed for each topic the material that I will use so that we can follow. And when I'm going to deliver the lecture, I'll let you know which of the materials we are using for a particular topic so that you can follow. Because the issue is that what we present here are PowerPoints. So PowerPoints, they just give you indications of what you should know. To get a full understanding of what you should know, you have to read the textbook. Because the exam questions may not just be about the PowerPoint, but what the topic has covered. Okay. There are other books, so you can look through that. Ground rules. What are the ground rules to ensure that we have a conducive atmosphere for our lectures? 1, attend all lectures. And we mentioned that minimum of 75% attendance is required for examination. Now, then read all relevant chapters before the class so that you can easily follow. So for each topic, as I said, we'll come to that. I've indicated the text. At the end of each lecture, I'll give you practice questions, which you may not be required to submit as assignments, but for you to cross-check as you learn whether you can answer them. Because once you can answer the questions, it means that you are following the class. And the exam should not be a problem for you. So I'll make sure that at the end of each lecture, there are questions on that topic so that when you read, you can test yourself whether you understand them or not. All assignments should be submitted on due dates, no late submissions. No late submissions, please. And we'll strictly go by that. No late submissions. We'll make compromises, but there are some things we can't compromise. So bear with us. Okay. Now, you have to participate actively in class. Usually, we award some marks for participation and attendance. Attendance and participation, we award marks for it to encourage you so that you can bring out your ideas and share with your colleagues and also with the lecturer. We are also going to learn from you. Then, this one, mute or put off your mobile phones in class. This is very important because it can disrupt the lectures. Okay, so when immediately you step in here, you ensure that you have muted, or in the extreme case, off it, so that you can concentrate in class. It is very, very important. Then no unnecessary loitering and noise during lectures. We want the class to be lively. We want the class to be participatory, but it has to be what? Orderly. It has to be orderly. If you want to talk, just draw my attention. I'll be willing to allow you to talk. Then always be punctual. As much as possible, be punctual to lectures so that we can have everything going well. Now, in terms of the course delivery, I've structured the topics in line with the calendar. So for instance, if you take the first topic, that's a table that is there. The topic is nature and philosophy of management research. And you have the subtopics, nature of business and management research, and then philosophy of management research. And the main text there is Saunders et al., which is the second text, the number 2 on the list. So that goes on for all the topics, such that by the 7th week or 6th week, we should do a half, we call a mid-trimester exam. So that one, I'll tell you the nature of it later on. If it's going to be an assignment, it will not eat into our lecture time. So that's why if you see that I'll put a topic there, suggesting that it's likely to be an assignment, so that you do it and bring it to class and we can have our lecture. Okay. Any question on the outline? The 10th week will be for revision. We'll go over what we would have done from the start to finish. Then the 11th and the 12th week will be for examinations. Okay. Any question on the course outline before we start the lecture? Any question? All right, yes. Okay, then the lecture. Now, we've been hearing about the word research. Research, research. In your view, what is research? What is research? When we say research, what do we mean? Yes. It's what? Research is a method of what? Gathering data. This is a research is a way or nature of what? Data gathering. Who else? Thank you very much. Yes. A structured way of what? Inquiring into a particular phenomenon. Thank you very much. Yes, sir. A process of acquiring information from a source. All right. Now, our first topic is nature and philosophy of management research. And when we talk about research, somebody said the simplest way of defining research is to say that research means search again and again. Search again and again. That's the simplest way of defining research. Now, but if we want to define research in a more comprehensive manner, then we have to talk about research as being a systematic approach. Systematic approach to conceptualizing a research idea, designing research protocols, systematic way of collecting data, systematically analyzing the data, systematically interpreting the data. And then finally, you disseminate the information that would have come out of the analysis. Okay? Now, founders, they have given a definition to research. They say that research is something that people undertake in order to find things out in a systematic way, thereby increasing their knowledge. So first, research is an undertaking. In other words, it's a journey. Research is not an event, it's a journey that is undertaken with a purpose in order to find things. There's a purpose. You can't just get up and start interviewing people without a reason, without a direction. So every research has a purpose. Without purpose, there's no research. Then research requires a step-by-step approach. That's what we call a systematic approach. Which means that for a research to be regarded as scientific, and once you are in an academic institution, regardless of your discipline, your research is required to be scientific. And to be scientific means that it has to follow the scientific process. We have the scientific process. And the scientific process will require that every step of the research should be valid, be regarded as valid, as credible, as reliable. Otherwise, that's why sometimes somebody will come and present research outcomes and it will be discredited. They'll ask you, how many people did you interview? You mentioned 5. How did you arrive at choosing 5 people? You now have to explain by convincing them that the 5 people, according to the science, is enough to gather data and make valid conclusions. If not, they will just say the 5 people you have interviewed is not representative of the sample, and that's where trouble will come. Once you hear that it is not representative of the sample, it means that the entire research has fallen apart. So just by the sample selection, determining how many people would be enough for you to interview and produce a valid research is very important. That's why sometimes when they do the polls and they release, one group will say that NDC will win, another group will say that MPP will win. Meanwhile, they are all doing the research on Ghanaians. Why is it that one person is saying that NDC will win, another is saying MPP will win? So we now have to go through the research methods. What research method did A use? Are they valid? What research method did B use? Are they valid? Then we can come to a good conclusion on that. For Moxley, he re-emphasizes that research is a systematic investigation. Once again, carried out with a purpose. And the purpose is that you can discover new knowledge. One of the purposes for conducting research is to discover new knowledge, something new. That's the ideal thing. So usually when you are giving your research topic, or when you come out, you will not be giving research topic. Let me retract that. When you come out with your research topic and you are assigned to a supervisor, one of the first questions the supervisor will ask you is, what is new about your topic? Tell me something new that will come out of the topic. If you are not able to convince the supervisor that there is something new there, believe me, the topic will not be approved. Because one, new knowledge. New knowledge. Sometimes you may not be able to generate new knowledge, but you can expand on existing knowledge. You are building on, maybe there's a theory in management. That theory, you've seen that is not being applied within our context. And you want to test whether the theory is valid within our context. Then you are just expanding existing knowledge. And you may come out with some caveats to that existing knowledge. But that is a lower level contribution compared to the new knowledge. Okay? Sometimes it may just be to solve practical problems. You've seen that maybe Ghanaians are not using green technology. You want to conduct a research to address that problem. So in that case, your research is problem-solving oriented. And our PhDs, that's where we want to target the topics around. Problem-solving oriented. You tell us where you are working. What problem have you identified? And how do you use research to solve that problem? Then, through research, companies develop new products. Apple, Samsung, and all of them, they have research departments. And that's why they release new versions of their products. All that will come through research. Apps and new services all are developed through research. Therefore, we summarize research in the terms of the following characteristics. The research, first, the data collection is systematic. Analysis, systematic. Interpretation, systematic. And then there's a clear purpose driving it. So the purpose of your research is manifested in your statement of problem. and then your research questions, and then your research objectives. All align the purpose of your research. And that's why if you are not able to come out with a clear purpose, you will not be permitted to move through these stages. Because once the purpose is not there, there is no direction. This is a car that is moving in all directions. It will arrive at no destination. Okay? So clear purpose. So as we go through this course, let research ideas begin to flow through your minds. And as they come, write them down. So that when it comes to submission, along the line, we'll ask you to submit possible research topics that we can screen and then approve them for you to proceed with the research. Okay. Now, what are the features of business and management research? But before we come to that, we have to just define briefly these two concepts: research methods and research methodology. The methods simply refer to techniques and procedures used to obtain data. Techniques and procedures used to obtain data. So these methods may include, for instance, interview. It's a method. So, and we have different types of interview. You can have face-to-face interview. You can have a virtual interview, online questionnaire that people will fill. You can also do focus group discussion. So a discussion is an interview. It's a form of a technique of doing research. Then we have research methodology, which is a theory of how research should be undertaken. The theory of how we should undertake research. So it will spell out your philosophy. And we'll talk about philosophies because I gave the first part of my lecture to financial accounting. We will not get there today, but hopefully next we will look at the philosophies. They will ask you, you present your research, they will ask you, what is your philosophy? What is your philosophy? So somebody will say that I am a positivist. And another person will say that I am an interpretivist. Another person will say that I am a critical realist. Then another will say that I am a pragmatist. Pragmatist in the sense that I deal with what works. I'm not aligned to any research school. So long as what I'm using will work for my situation, whether it is coming from positivism, interpretivism, or realism, I don't care. But there are some people, you will just stick to one. I'm a positivist. So when you present something which is not a positivism research, he will not be interested. Okay? But you have to choose your stand, and we'll come to that later on during the process. The methodology also involve research design. Whether we have different kinds of research designs. Okay? And we'll come to that. Research design will be a topic on this one. Now, let's talk about the features of business and management research. The first and foremost feature is that Business and management research is transdisciplinary in nature. It crosses disciplinary boundaries. You can bring in sociology. You can bring in physics, or we sometimes borrow terms in physics, especially those in economics and finance. You can bring in psychology. Then if you are in accounting, you can bring in finance, human resource management, public administration, among others. Because the job of the manager is complex. He cannot just limit himself to the products that he or she will be selling, because they are impacted by factors that are outside his or her discipline. So management research is transdisciplinary, meaning that it cuts across several disciplines. The other characteristic or quality of management research is that the ideas that are developed in the process are required to align with practice. And they must have practical consequence. And that's why we have realized that when you want to conduct research and you want to interview managers, it is very difficult. It becomes easy when the manager knows that the research you are going to conduct has practical implications for his or her organization. Otherwise, most managers will not be interested in answering a questionnaire that you will send to them. So the management research must have practical relevance, practical consequences. Unlike research in physics that can be highly theoretical, the aim is now to develop something which can become practical later. But they may not really care so much about the practical implications now. But for business, they want the results now. Okay? They want to see the profits. And that feeds into the next feature, which is that for management research, we must complete what we call the virtuous cycle, where you move from theory to practice, from theory to practice. So you have to come down from the high horse of theory and then go to the field and indicate how the research work will be applied there. So that makes the business and management research to be distinct from any other research field. Then the last one is that it is problem solving in nature. Businesses conduct research with the view to solving a particular problem. Unlike, as I said, in physics or chemistry, it may just be a theoretical work. But business, he has seen that sales has reduced. He wants to know why. So he has to conduct research rather than just sit down and guess. You have to conduct research and then use the outcome to enrich your decisions as a manager. Now, when it comes to business research, there are some key debates that are ongoing as to how business research should look like and how it should be done. So we call it the knowledge production process or the knowledge creation process. And we have at least 3 modes And each of these modes are debates surrounding how business research should be conducted. And we have what we call mode 1, knowledge creation. Mode 1, knowledge creation. And mode 1 says that the research that is conducted is such that it will solve academic problems or it will generate academic interest, so that it will not emphasize applied research. So the research, therefore, that is generated from mode 1 research is not relevant to practitioners. And that is the research that most of us do. On my own, if I sit down to conduct my research, which is not going to be paid by somebody else, I'm not going to do a research that will solve a problem for Ghana Commercial Bank. No. I'm going to do a research that will advance knowledge. I don't have a target group. So when I finish the research, I'm going to give general recommendations. And I have contributed to knowledge. I put the papers together and use it to apply for my promotions. They promote me, and I'm fine. So that's mode 1. I don't care about the practical implications of the research at all. Okay? Then comes mode 2, knowledge creation. With mode 2, the emphasis is on practice. How can research address practical issues? And this may involve collaboration between the academia and industry. So sometimes I would be there and then I'll be approached by a firm who want to conduct research on so and so and so and so. I say, okay, then let's sign the contract. Okay? So I do the research. This time, the approach is different because, and we'll come to that, what I've realized is that most industry people don't like the rigorous research we do. So in fact, I consider the research they want as being quite boring because they like pie charts and bar charts, histograms. But I want equations, models. If I do my report for them and I add equations, they will tell me to drop those equations. But if the equations are not there, I'm also not comfortable. I don't think that I have done good research. So there's really a balance here, and we'll come to different types of research. So that's mode.
Some are not necessary.
Then we have mode 3. The problem is that mode 2 research will often focus on profits, research that will engender profits, that will entrench profits. Sometimes the research may not generate profits. It may just be to the good of society, just to benefit society. So if you focus on mode 2 alone, there are certain research that will be, for instance, going to the moon. Want to do research, how to go to the moon, and to find out how life can be around there. It's a very expensive endeavor that usually you will not even have firms attempting that. So usually governments go to US, NASA, they will undertake those high-level research that may not be of benefit to firms, especially in the short run, but to the benefit of the general society, such research may be good. So mode 3 research will focus on an appreciation of the human condition as it is and as it might become. So you look into the future, and the purpose is just to assure the survival and the common good of society. So these are different modes of knowledge creation. You decide where to fall. As managers, you would want to fall in at least mode 2. As an academic, I'll most often be in mode 1. Then usually those, especially the military and national space authorities, they would want the mode 3, very high level. But the debate is for business research to reach that level, mode 3, where businesses can then just also do research for the benefit of society, not just focusing on profit alone. So that is, these are some of the debates. Now, it has frozen. Okay. Now, there are debates also surrounding, for instance, the relevance of the research that is conducted. When I sit in my office as an academic to conduct research without the inputs of industry, in the end, my research is kept at the library or is just online and nobody uses it for anything. Why? Because the producer of the knowledge is different from the consumer. Industry is supposed to be the consumer. I'm the supplier. Industry is the consumer or the user. So the question is, how do we bridge this gap between the academia and then industry, which is the consumer of knowledge? What do you think? How do you think we can address that problem? How can we address that problem? Yes. How do we address the problem that the academic will just be in his office and conduct research, which is not being used? If you go to the library, they will show you dissertations, hundreds of them. They are just there gathering dust. The only time they will be opened is when another student comes and wants to know how to conduct a similar one. Then they give them and they open and see how it's done. But in there are recommendations that are made with the view to advancing practice. And these recommendations are never seen by those who have to use them for practice. The question is, how do we ensure that knowledge producers and then knowledge users meet? In other words, the knowledge that is produced reaches the consumers, the users. How do we? That is what will address the relevance gap. We should put them together. How do we do that? So how do we do that? So we should create a forum where there will be an interaction between the academia and then what? Industry. The question is, what kind of forum? Yes.
As well, the academic institution which always provides the industry, like management or on into relevant paper presentations and other presentations. When they are during paper, that related research that we look in the industry and we invite within the industry that has something to do with that research to partake in the paper so that they can also make inputs as well as pick whatever research academic research.
Yeah, so that's very important. Thank you.
By publishing the research finding in easy to access journals.
So an online participant is saying that we should publish the research in easy to access journals. So the way to polish is that we should do what we call policy briefs. We call it policy brief. When I go and then conduct my research and I use my equations, industry is not interested in the equations. So I produce a non-technical version of the research and then serve it out to industry. But those ones will not be published in academic journals because they are non-technical. See, that's the problem. Because they are non-what? Technical. So we can publish them in magazines, in newspapers. And very soon we would institute that because the University of Ghana Business School, they have that. So when you go to the dean's office, one of the papers that will greet you will be policy briefs that have been produced. So that's a very important contribution. Now, we can really organize several fora. We have conferences that we can organize and bring industry on board. We can just organize a networking event with industry. Then we can also send students on attachments. And during the attachment, they learn and come out with problems. We do that to some extent using the third trimester for the undergraduate programs. But that one concerns communities. But this one, we are particularly talking about businesses. Now, the other debate has to do with whether business research should be evidence-based. The typical thing we want to happen is that decisions taken by top management should not be based on just experience. Experience is good and valuable, but what may be happening currently may not be solvable through experience. But what we have observed is that most managers, because they carry themselves about as big bosses, they rely so much on their experience rather than research. So one of the things we are advocating is that business decisions should be evidence-based. Business management should be evidence-based. Base your management on research. And that will address what we call the research practice gap. Sometimes we practice without research. Sometimes we do the research without practice. So evidence-based management solves that problem. And that should be the way to go. Now, based on relevance, we have a 4-quadrant analysis of what we call the relevance gap, the relevance gap. The first quadrant is what we call pedantic science. Pedantic science. Now, this is, before I come to that, management research, it is said, has to cross a double hurdle. There's a double hurdle. The first hurdle is that management research should be theoretically sound and methodologically rigorous, which means that management research should follow the scientific process. It must pass the test of the scientific process. Now, having passed the first hurdle, that is the scientific process, it must also pass a second hurdle. And that second hurdle is practical relevance, or putting the research into practice. So double hurdle, theoretically sound, methodologically rigorous. That's the first hurdle. Second hurdle, it must be relevant and be able to lend itself to practice or to application. Now, that said, we can then analyze and segment management research into the quadrants that are illustrated here. So we have pedantic science, which is high on the methodological rigor, and then the theoretical soundness. So it has high level of theoretical and methodological rigor, but it is low on relevance or practice. Now, such research will be what you will find in most academic journals, because you must meet a threshold of some scientific competence before your paper is accepted for publication. And for those of us in academia, it is a very big hurdle. You can send your paper to 5 different journals and all of them will reject it. They'll all reject it. Meanwhile, you have gathered data, you've done analysis, you've done interpretation, discussion, you have laid out the paper complete. And then you are told that this paper is good, but you send sometimes someone will just look at, you will send the paper in the morning, by evening they have rejected it. We call it debt rejection. Sometimes you submit it in the night, by the time you wake up in the morning, they will say, we regret. When you just see that and we regret, then you know that there's trouble. Sometimes they will not give you a reason. Sometimes my first experience as a scholar, when I submitted a paper to a particular journal, they just sent it by and told me that they have a backlog of papers that they are still considering. So they are sorry, they cannot process my paper. I was very furious. I was fuming. I said, how should I respond? At that time, I actually responded because I was a very young researcher. You know, when you are a very young researcher, there's a lot of hot blood. So I responded. But later on, I learned that when they reject your paper, just say, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Because when you write back, you can be blacklisted. So that they will just put you on a blacklist anytime you send your paper rejects, no matter how good it is. So when they reject, sometimes when you receive the rejection notice, you will be so angry that you may have to leave the mail for about 2 weeks so that your temperature will calm down. Then you can now send a nice reply and say, thank you very much. Otherwise, if you want to respond immediately, you would use words that you yourself, you will not like it later on when those words are read to you. Okay, so we have grown to accept rejection. Okay, we have grown to reject it. Yes. So what happens is that the journals are in tiers, in levels. Okay? They are in levels. So when you want to submit a paper, know where the paper stands in the discipline. The fact that the paper has been rejected by Journal A does not mean that it will be rejected by Journal B. So if they don't give you any response in terms of what the weaknesses are, find another journal and submit it. But before that, just read through the paper again yourself. Because sometimes just typographical mistakes, a lot of the journals, they don't tolerate that. Once they find that some of the things that can lead to immediate rejection will be number one, plagiarism. When you just submit the paper, immediately the journal, their system automatically will produce a report, a screening report, to give a report on plagiarism. It will give a report on whether you have used artificial intelligence. It will give report of the correctness of the grammar. So that is what they will check first. If your paper has not crossed this, then the first, it will be the administrators of the journal who are not even qualified to review the paper. They are those who will now take the decision and send the paper back. But if it has passed through the first screening, then the editor will now look at it and now go through and see whether, first of all, does it align with the purpose of the journal? Because if you send a chemistry paper to a human resource journal, what do you expect? Rejection, straight. It may be a good paper, but you have gone to the wrong avenue. So later on, we'll take you through that, how to select the right journal for your discipline. Otherwise, you just throw it. And when I was beginning, I had a lot of problem with that. You just see the name of the journal and it will excite you. Then you send the paper there and they will tell you that we are sorry. Your paper does not align with the purpose of this journal. Okay, so that's important. Now, the second quadrant is what we call the popularist science. And that one, it is low on the theory and methods in terms of the rigor, but it is high on the practical relevance. Can you give an example of such research? These are, for instance, books for what? Industry players or practitioners. If you see a practitioner's guide, this is not the time for theories. They will sieve out all the theories and only leave what is required for what? Practice. So practitioners' guides or books that are meant for practitioners are low in theoretical and methodological rigor, but they are high in application. Then we have purer science, which is both low in theoretical and methodological rigor, as well as what? Practical relevance. It's also low in terms of the practice. Can you think about an example of such research? Low, low. These are usually what you see in magazines, in newspapers. Newspapers don't publish theories. Okay? So newspapers, most of the work that most of the journalists do, they usually don't have high-level theoretical and methodological rigor. Okay? Then we have pragmatic science, which is both high in theory and method in terms of the rigor, and then high in terms of the practical relevance. And we talked about especially those works. Remember that especially the advanced countries, they have specialized research departments, national research departments that produce, especially you go to China now in particular, they depend so much on research for practice. And they have highly talented individuals. In our part of the world, the highly talented individuals have been left and they have turned up being what? Fraudsters. Most of the fraudsters are more intelligent than some of us. We are not able to use them. So they are using their intelligence in a different way, which is harming society. But in the advanced countries, they hunt for talents. They spot them and they pick them. Sometimes they just isolate them. All they need to do is to think and research. What they will eat, what they will wear, the car they will drive, that one is not their problem. And that is why they are so much advanced in knowledge, in practice than us. Let me take questions so that we can end today's class, so that you can go for the lunch break and then come for the next lecture. I'm open to questions. Any question? Both those here and then online participants. Any question or contribution? Yes, please. So what he's asking whether what auditors do is a form of research. What auditors do is just some aspect. They don't complete the research cycle. It's just an aspect of research. Research involves investigation, which is what auditors do. They try to investigate. They gather all the information, then they investigate, and then they present their findings. Of course, sometimes the findings are limited or restricted to what? A control group. Unlike our typical research where we just broadcast it. But auditors may not follow the research process. And when we go through the research process, you see all the nitty-gritties. Auditors don't have to go through all the steps and decide that they will pick a representative sample. They can just decide that we will just randomly enter here and just sample 5. As to whether that 5 is representative or not, they don't care. So if the auditor now comes to present to me as an academic, I'll ask you questions. How did you decide to choose only 5 claims instead of assessing all of them? And so there are some differences between the work that auditors do and the work of research, which is more systematic, more detailed. Okay? Any other before we go for a break? We've been sitting for quite some time. Is that attendance? Yes, yes. So is preparing attendance for this class. So those of you here, ensure that you write your details. For each lecture, we'll have attendance. We have to find a way of the online. All right, so those online, he has taken the attendance. So we'll add it to the list so this one, what I'll do is that I'll keep it. I'll add it to the list. Okay. I'll add it to the list. All right. So since we don't have further questions, I thank you very much for your participation in the class. And for next week, we'll have our full lecture time, which is 2 hours. So we have to give part of the lecture for the financial accounting. So thank you and see you next week.